is going to be the Universe of BattleTech.
Yeah.
There it is. Take
Yeah.
it away, Saul. Tell us what it is
Oof.
about this that means something to you. Why do you like it? Why do you want to share it with us?
Well, starting off, besides, my love for aviation, I've also had a huge love of robotics and mechs, the mecha genre, stuff like that. Ever since I was a kid, starting out with like Transformers, when I was like
Yeah.
really young, and eventually that would boil over into other types of, robot oriented like shows and like stories and stuff like that. And eventually it would cross paths. My interest into that stuff would cross paths with a series, a PC simulation series called MechWarrior, specifically MechWarrior 2, back then.
Okay.
And I didn't know at the time, but the MechWarrior PC games, in which you play a MechWarrior in giant vertical combat tanks known as
Oh, I'm
battle
sorry,
mechs.
Soul. Just one second. I'll pause right there. We'll
Oh,
come back to the Mech Wars. We did just do
okay.
a performance. I'm wondering, do you want to hydrate before you continue?
Oh, I'm okay. Actually, I already had some water earlier, so I'm good.
Okay, proceed. So we talk about the Mech Warrior. Go on.
Yeah, yeah. So, MechWarrior is a PC, uh, a PC mech combat game or simulation game.
Mm-hmm.
And they've had a lot of games, but I specifically got it in it with the second one. And this guy over here that we're seeing on the screen is known as a Timberwolf or a Mad Cat, depending on what side you're talking to.
Cool.
And this is like the poster child of the franchise. This guy right here, this
Oh.
75 ton Omni mech is feared and loved and hated by multiple people, both in and out of the universe.
So he's kind of
Uh,
like the one where if this is displayed in any place, people know, okay, it's a Universe of BattleTech. He's
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
pretty
iconic.
much. Oh yeah, this is an incredibly iconic design. So basically, big stompy robots, fighting in a big interstellar war. Like that's my jam, right? That's the stuff I'm into. And then eventually later on, in like was like high school, college stuff like that, I later found out that MechWarrior is a PC game for the universe of BattleTech, which started out back in 1984 as a tabletop board game, like a tactical board game, uh, of moving around mechs and stuff on
Yeah.
and have all these rules and stuff that would simulate mech warfare according to the rules of how mechs work in this particular universe. And so, once I kind of put two and two together, I started reading the books, started getting into the actual tabletop side of it and whatnot. Then, afterwards, my interest in the series really just took off from there. And it's had a bit of a rough time, depending on what like decade we're talking about, as far as like its popularity and like where it's had a lot of ups and downs. Thankfully, recently, just within this past like several years, it's had a big resurgence. A lot of
Yeah.
things with the licensing and Kickstarter and stuff like that has really helped breathe new life into the universe. In fact, they're actually doing a bunch of I won't say reboots because they're not really rebooting anything. They're more like it's more like a soft reboot where they're basically reintroducing BattleTech to newer generations.
Sure.
A lot of the rules are refined, but there's still a lot of the same rules that existed in the 80s as far as the tabletop stuff goes. But everything's being redesigned, as you can see. This awesome um, Timberwolf here. I love to call it the Timberwolf, by the way, because that's how I learned about it.
Yeah.
This design here, this was a recent redesign. The original design that was introduced, I want to say in the early 90s, still looks great. I actually have a T-shirt of that old design.
Oh, awesome.
But this is the newer design. A lot of the redesigns they did for the mechs, thankfully, are just they all look amazing. They all kind of have almost like a Japanese mecha kind of stylish look
Yeah.
and quality to them, which is actually interesting because even though this series was created over here in the West, by Jordan Wiseman, and originally was from FASA, and then it changed over a bunch of hands and stuff. But the
Sure.
mechs, actually, a lot of the mechs, the early mechs that were in the designs were actually mechs that they had licensed from various Japanese artists in the 80s, from like the same mecha you would see in series like Macross, Dogrum, Crusher Joe. A lot of those mechs that were in that series, they actually licensed those designs to bring them over into, to use for their board game
Neat.
and stuff. And so like a lot of their earlier stuff was like straight up just Japanese, mechs from anime from the 80s that they just used for their universe. Unfortunately, there's a bunch of legal issues
Yeah, I can imagine.
Once Harmony Gold got well, and that right there, that is a lecture. That's probably a good hour lecture just to go through all the nonsense that have happened with that. But
Oof.
thankfully, the past couple years they actually won some court cases when they got brought back to court again for all these redesigns and all this other stuff.
Dang.
Thankfully, it's no longer an issue now, and they actually can use those. They can use those mechs that they had originally gotten, or that they originally paid the artists for, or at least the basic designs. They redesigned them all. So if you look at them and you look at the old designs, you'll be like, "Yep, that's the same mech, but this looks just different enough to where it fits the universe now. It's not just a straight port."
Man, that's a lot of
So
passion for that. I'm so glad they had the passion
oh
for it
yeah,
to go through all those legal battles and bring it back. They really love it, even though it's had up and down.
oh
That's
yeah,
great.
oh yeah. But yeah, gosh, yeah, just the BattleTech universe. Just it's a very unique universe because it's a series in the far future about humanity expanding out to the stars. But the big difference with it compared to like other kind of sci-fi series is that it's very human centric. There's no they're not. It's not like Star Trek where they're dealing with other alien races. It's humanity is expanding and humanity is really its own worst enemy. So it's basically humanity trying to fight with itself as it tries to survive out in the universe, and you can draw a lot of parallels between it and a fantasy series that a lot of people got into big time called what was it, the Game of Thrones series,
Ah,
as far as like various great houses, which are like feudal lord houses, because
ooh,
that's how it's ran in this universe because of the way how space travel works and communications. It's very slow.
yeah,
It's not like Star Wars or Star Trek where you can just jump into an area and get communications and people in and out of systems really quick. It's all very slow, the way the technology works. And so
yeah,
the only way systems of government could exist in those huge spaces, they had to resort more to I guess you could call it like a neo-feudalistic society, where
yeah.
they
That's
have
a
their
clever
spaceship, they
blend.
got their lasers, they got all that cool stuff, but it's all, that everyone has vassals and you have, lords and titles and all that type of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. I see.
And so
That's nice.
you have, these five great houses of the inner sphere, they call them, and then you have a bunch of other smaller nations on the outside
This
called
this
periphery.
this lore with all the houses, was this
Yeah.
present when it first began, or did this come in the '90s, or is this modern right now?
Oh no, this has been lore since the original came out in 1984. So like I keep telling people, because basically the basic premise is that humanity expands out to the stars. Eventually, a lot of individual nations start to form. They start to break away from Earth, and they become their own thing. They eventually become the great houses in the inner sphere. And there's a lot of infighting on who wants, basically who wants to have more territory and all this other stuff, and it gets really, really bad, like really bad. And then eventually, a new power from Earth basically comes up and is able to unite all the great houses under a common banner called the Star League, where all the different member states, they all still have they still have their claims, they still have their nations,
Yeah,
but they all kind of work together under a single banner. And for a while, it kind of works. There's a moment of peace that everyone enjoys. For the most part, there's a lot of shadow wars happening in the
yeah.
background. There's a
Lot of
lot of
tension.
stuff happening. Yeah, but for the most part, if you're just like a casual observer, like, this is pretty cool. But if you're on certain sides of the aisle, you're like, oh man, this really sucks. But unfortunately, it all falls down, from within. It's kind of like the fall of Rome, actually. And so,
Ooh,
because of which, there is a vacuum of power that needs to be filled
sure.
on who is going. Because everybody, even though House Cameron. Those are the guys that were rolling. They're the ones in charge of the Star League. Their house falls, and now all the other great houses are like, oh, well, we claim the title of First Lord, basically, the head honcho that runs Star League, because of this, or because of our history with this, or because of our dealings with this, or
Mm-hmm.
blah blah blah. And so now all the factions are fighting each other, in these what do they call them? Wars of succession, to try and succeed as the
The head of it all.
as First Lord, yeah. And so it like I tell people, it was the concept was like Game of Thrones, several years before Game of Thrones,
Yeah.
except with giant mechs in the future, and so
That's a good comparison. That does sound
yeah.
very like. Go on.
Yeah, so, and then I can get into a lot more. Like there was 4 succession wars, by the way, which spanned over 300 years of them constantly being like, "Nope, I'm gonna be First Lord. Nope, I'm gonna be First Lord." And then, even more history happens, much further out. Like the clan invasion,
Yeah.
which is, we're getting into lore that would have to have even more, explanation. But it goes into clan invasion, the Civil War, and just all sorts of other, like just like there's a lot of lore. They've been constantly expanding, the lore of the series ever since the 80s. And in fact, actually, the most recent lore they're actually expanding. What? Let's see. I would say, let's see. Right now, I'm playing a game called MechWarrior 5. And that game is set in the 3015, which is like when you're first getting into BattleTech, that's kind of like the beginner area, and then once you get further out, like 3050, that's the clan invasion, and then further out than that, that's the Civil War, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Now they're at like they're just writing stuff, and they're gonna just start release stuff for the era of like 3150. So now it's like, oh, it's over 100 years,
And
compared to where
and
I'm at
this
with MechWarrior
the
5 right now. So
yeah, and this is for like the modern game, or is this the game that's most recently released? What the story is at right now, right?
where the most current story is. But the thing is with BattleTech is that you have a lot of fans that you have the old school fans that grew up with like the Succession Wars stuff, and when the clan stuff came out in the 90s, um, a lot of fans were like, this is horribly imbalanced, and it was like the way they did things back then, like it was super cheap. But that was kind of the point, is that these clan invaders, which were a holdover from the Star League Defense Force before a lot of them decided to go into self exodus when the Inner Sphere started destroying each other. They're like, yeah, this is crazy. You guys are destroying the dream. We're gonna leave and never
Yes.
come back. And then eventually they leave and they become their own society, and they get warped by over 200 two to 300 plus years of isolation, and coming up with a new way of thinking, a new clan society, and eventually like, you know what, I think it's time we return to the Inner Sphere and we make things right again, and we conquer the Inner Sphere, kind of thing. And so they re-invade. The people in the Inner Sphere thought they were aliens,
Yeah.
invading aliens at the moment because their tech looks so different. And eventually, like, oh wait, no, these are those guys that left like over 300 years ago. Oh great, you know. And so there's a lot of people that don't like that. Me personally, I love that.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of when I got into BattleTech, was the whole clan tech and all that stuff. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Because this guy right here, the Timberwolf right here, is a clan mech. That hence why
Ah.
it's called a Timberwolf, because the Timberwolf is the original name given to it by Clan Wolf, designer of the Clan Wolf. In the Inner Sphere, Comstar identified it as a Mad Cat, because Felon Kel's
Okay.
Wolfhound mech was having trouble identifying it, because mechs in the Inner Sphere before the clan invasion, they had been the Inner Sphere as a whole, they kind of bombed each other back to the Stone Age. It's kind of an appropriate way to say, because they're basically trying to negate. They went from such technological marvels during the Star League, and then the succession wars that followed. Basically, they did the best they could to try and deny any sort of technological advance that the opponent may have had.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it pretty much degraded technology and just living standards and stuff
Oof.
so far behind of what was. Yeah, they lost so much progress, and so a lot of the mechs that they had were all kind of piecemeal from the stuff they still had, and the very few
Right.
plants that were
So
still active that they
yeah.
could
So
build stuff. They were just doing the best they could,
and
But
then therefore they couldn't really
yeah,
identify any fully complete mechs. So it was difficult.
yeah. So well, for the these brand new mechs that nobody's seen before. This guy comes waltzing in, this Timberwolf here, and their computer is the Felon Kell's Wolfhound's computer is trying to identify the mech, that is fighting him on this remote moon.
Yeah.
And there's two things specifically with this design here. This design here, this Timberwolf, looks like a cross between a Marauder and a Catapult. The Marauder, as far as like the arm cannons that it has on it, and that's unique shape of like the cockpit and things like that, and then the Catapult because of the box the box LRMs on there, like the missile racks they have on the top, you know,
Yeah.
and the kind of like the chicken leg kind of like walker legs, it looked like a cross between those, so it was constantly going between Mad and Cat, and so eventually they decided to just call them Mad Cat. And so yeah, a lot of the clan stuff, a lot of the clan invasion mechs and stuff like that, when it comes in,
Such an
they have two
intricate
separate
tale.
names. They have the original clan names, and they have whatever the inner sphere identifies them.
Yeah.
It's kind of like NATO. They have their own identifications and stuff like
Oh,
that.
that's
So
so intricate, and clearly you're passionate about this one. I'm glad the Universe of BattleTech brings you so much joy. Do you want to keep talking about it, or do you want to move on to your next one?
well, I mean, I could, oh, gosh, I could keep talking about this thing for hours. That's the problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually, funny enough, I actually just bought some brand new books for it. What is it? I actually have it literally right next to me here. What did I buy? Let's see. I recently bought the BattleTech Tactical Operations book, which is their advanced rule set for the tabletop. And that's actually one more thing I'll bring up before we can move on is that besides like the video games and stuff like that, BattleTech as a whole has so much you can get involved with. The creators of the game actually went out of their way to simulate so many different avenues of what you can do in the universe. So like I was talking about before, started off as a tabletop tactical war game. That rule set is now called Total Warfare. So it's like a combined arms game. Mechs are like the forefront of it, but you still have your vehicles, you still have your aerospace stuff, you still have Navy, you have all this other stuff. You have infantry, soldiers. It all works together. It all has its place in the game.
Yeah.
But what you can do is you can actually drill down to, instead of playing these big battles, instead you can drill down and you can just be the one soldier on the ground in a RPG style game. They have two different offerings for that. They have what is it? It used to be called Mech Warrior, surprisingly. Back in the 80s and 90s, they had an RPG system called Mech Warrior. But ever since Microsoft got a hold of the licensing, they're like, you can't use that name anymore. That's a name we own. So they're like, oh crap. So they're and BattleTech, unfortunately, just the nature of kind of how things were divided up back then.
Yeah.
But yeah, they have an RPG system called A Time of War, where you can basically play as a mech warrior or a soldier, or heck, you can play as like an accountant guy if you wanted. And so, but a lot of the rules are very similar. It's very compatible. And then you have the opposite, where instead of controlling individual mechs and lances, which is a fancy term of saying like a squad for like mechs, you have 4 mechs to a lance or 5 to a star, for talking about clanner stuff. You can drill up to where instead of controlling individual mechs and lances, you can now control mechs in like companies, to where it's more abstract. So now you're fighting a much bigger battlefield instead of like a small scenario. Now you're in a much bigger battlefield, and then they can drill up further than that, and you can command companies, doing planetary invasions. They have separate rules for how to do a planetary invasion, and then you can drill up further than that. It's like, oh, well, we're not just satisfied with planetary invasions. Let's drill up further and create a separate rule set system to where you can actually plan out naval invasions and learn how to like fight and take over like an entire solar system, you know. And then you can drill up even further than that with a separate rule system called Interstellar. Was it? You had, if I can remember the books real quick, you have A Time of War. That's the RPG system, and then above that would be like Total Warfare, and then afterwards above that would be Tactical Operations, which is their advanced rule set. So you can do like planetary invasions and more advanced rules. And then above that, it's strategic operations, which you can do like naval stuff in outer space and get involved with like solar system kind of like combat operations. And then above that, you have interstellar operations. And that is where you can actually
and then above
drill
that,
up so high. Well, no, so interstellar operations, that's when you actually become the leader of an entire great house or a clan or a periphery member state. And you basically have abstract rules to where you literally play out like a giant strategic board game of you trying to take over the entire universe.
Wow.
And so now you're no longer dealing with individual mechs. You're now dealing with like like spreadsheets of like mech divisions and your forces on individual planets and
Universal management.
Universal management, taxes, your technology base, just all sorts of stuff like that. Your dealings with other great houses. You can play at any avenue in this universe you want. They got the rules for it, and it's been like that for the past 30 years. And with the most recent stuff, they basically kind of straightening some rules out, fixing errors and things like that. But for the most part, all the rules are still the same. They've released new content, so if you want to do more of a Warhammer 40K style like tabletop war game, because that's popular, they have like faster rules that plays a little quicker like that, that are a bit more abstract on the rules compared to like the actual like tabletop war game. Because the tabletop war game, it's almost like D&D when you look at all the character sheets, or
Sure.
or they basically like each mech has like a character sheet equivalent, of loadouts inside the mech, all the weapons, the heat it generates, if your armor gets hit, where on the mech does it hit, please point where on the mech where on the mech the long range missile touched you.
It's nuanced and detailed, so it's
yeah,
it's a very immersive experience kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
So
there you have it, that one, folks.
Yep. So yeah, that's where I'll leave that one.
Yeah. Like you said, he can go on for this one. Clearly, again, he loves it. So thank you.
Yeah, you don't want me to go on.
Yeah. Oh no, thank you, the Universe of BattleTech, for giving Sol something that he clearly loves. So give it up for the Universe of BattleTech people before we move on.
Yay.